The KRGS Doors Show, proudly brought to you by KRGS Doors. For all your shopfront roller shutters, roller grills, folding closures and bifold doors, visit www.krgsdoors.com.au. Welcome to the KRGS Doors podcast. I'm your host, Drew Blackman. The aim of our podcast is to talk to cool people with cool stories, whether it be our suppliers, customers, staff, other business owners, or people from different walks of life, and get to know them a bit better. If you're interested in coming on, drop us a line or email, or connect with us via Facebook, and we can have a chat to see what we can do. Today on episode 42 of the 2-year-old KRGS Doors podcast, I'm joined by KRGS Doors Managing Director Clayton Blackman, and we talk to Stuart Percy from Voss Constructions. We talk all things in the shop fitting industry as well as working in Tasmania, along with learning about Stuart's side hustle, which will surprise you. I'll also let you in on our next episode's guest, but for now, please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Stuart Percy.
If this doesn't turn you on, folks, you haven't got a switch.
Stuart, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. What is the Stuart Percy story?
Oh, well, thanks very much for having us, Drew and Clayton. I suppose it's I've just turned 50 in the last year, so it's a reasonable length of story, I suppose. But look, yeah, born and bred in Tassie, and raised up on the eastern shore in Hobart, and had a pretty good upbringing. Great family support. Played footy and cricket, and did fairly well at schooling. My father was in the construction game. He worked with AB Jennings for 30 odd years before he unfortunately passed away. So I sort of got a bit of a building bug very, very early on, and as an industry to go into, that was set in pretty early for me, and got involved in an apprenticeship through AB Jennings initially with early works and stuff like that. Sort of moved into a joinery type carpentry apprenticeship with a small company in Hobart, that sort of started off me in the industry. So it was, and here we are now. I've actually just been at Voss 20 years, so it's time sort of goes by. So it's certainly around the family. Got a wife and 2 other kids, and still live in Hobart and get to Melbourne fairly frequently with our business, obviously over in Melbourne, in Mitcham. So
Mate, you talk about Hobart. It's an absolute beautiful place, part of the world down there in Hobart. I got to spend some time down there. We had a conference down there a few years ago, and it was one of the best. But it's such a beautiful little town, beautiful little city, I should say, there at Hobart, mate. But it's fantastic. But mate, how did you start? You're obviously with AB Jennings. How did you start in the shop fitting industry with Voss?
Oh, well, I suppose I'll probably go back a little bit. So the Jennings stuff, I was actually doing work there in my school holidays and stuff like that. So it wasn't, the apprenticeship wasn't with AB Jennings. It was prior to my apprenticeship, I should have said.
Right.
So obviously with Dad looking after that, he was state construction manager of Jennings. So every school holiday that came up, I'd get thrown out onto a site with a couple of well-experienced chippies, and learned a lot of craft in those early days for not just a specific part of the trade, but we did all sorts of things. So so I moved into a joinery apprenticeship, or carpentry joinery apprenticeship with a small company here in Hobart. By the end of that, it was a 3.5-year apprenticeship, and I got put straight into a foreman's role as soon as I finished there. And that was, we had about 6 or 7 guys in the workshop. So I learned very early, how to manage people and things like that. So I moved into that, and unfortunately that company didn't sort of progress, and it shut about 2 or 3 years later. So I actually went into, my dad at that stage, Jennings had sort of pulled out of Tasmania as well, and this was in 93. So just after our recession that we had to have, and so we actually started up our own family building business, which we did we did resi building, and we had a small joinery factory ourselves. And,
Right.
So that went for about 10 years, and it was just after maybe 2002. So we had a couple of years of GST coming in.
Yeah.
Which I lost a bit of confidence in where we were at, and unfortunately, my dad had passed away halfway through that stage, and I was really looking at having a bit of time off, and I just I was actually going to have a year off. We'd just finished building a house, just started a family, and I was just reading the paper one Saturday morning. I saw an advert for a supervisor at Voss, and I just sort of got to thinking, and I thought I'll go down and have a look, see what I got to say. And here we are 20 years later. We've got the job on the spot just about, and it sort of progressed into it. At that stage, they were providing joinery for some national, fit-out builders.
Right.
And that's stage, I wasn't aware there was I wasn't aware that there was actually a fit-out industry, so to speak. So we were providing joinery for a large, national or international brand at that stage, and it was sort of. And when I joined Voss, I was a supervisor with the joinery team, so sort of looking after all that side of it. And I sort of progressed into. The client had sort of asked us that, as we were doing some joinery, would we like to entertain, doing some building work? So, and the first one was in Adelaide, and I thought, that's a bit that's different, but we're actually doing some stuff here, and we're going to build a shop in Adelaide. So that really was an opening for, opening my eyes to, a completely different world of fit out, which now been in for nearly that whole duration of 20 years that I've been at Voss. So, and that's progressed from, just one avenue really, and we thank that client dearly, because that sort of opened up all these avenues for us to grow as a business and to have dozens of different types of fit out customers and brands locally and internationally, and we've seen a lot of Australia that I wouldn't have probably seen otherwise if I wasn't in this game.
In the shop fitting industry.
So it's particularly in the earlier days where I was going out and actually being the site foreman on these roles, as my role in these fit out startup of a part of the company. So it was only myself and two others that were involved in it, which we've still got one here now, who's one of our estimators. But grown the team a fair bit, so it's a fair bit of change, obviously, in that period. But we've had the opportunity to grow. The
shop fitting industry, mate, certainly can take you far and wide.
Yeah, definitely. It's from we visited Italy with one of our clients. We've worked in all over the country and far reaches of Western Australia and northern Queensland and even to New Zealand. We've done some fit out work over there as well. So it's created lots of opportunities.
You talk about your apprenticeship, mate. You must have made an impression going straight into a foreman's role as soon as you did your time there. So you must have made an impression. They must have been impressed with you.
Oh, look, I think it was just I suppose I love what I do. I love building stuff. I love making stuff, and at that stage, it was probably more primarily around joinery.
Yeah.
So, and I just had the ability to be able to get on with, in particular, the senior guys in the trades. Here I was just out of my 19th birthday, and I was managing guys in their 60s.
Yeah.
But I was able to develop a rapport really well with those guys. And I think that was lent on to say, okay, well, who's the next person through? So,
good. You've been at Voss now 20 years. Tell us about Voss Construction. So your role, when did it start, the number of employees and the type of business?
Yeah, so Voss has been a household name in Tasmania for nearly 60 years now. So, it's, the founder of Voss in Tasmania was Ralph Voss, who'd started up a corner store in Launceston, grocery chain, which it developed into. He introduced self-serve shopping experience into the supermarket game.
Yeah.
And it was they had sort of got through that. They'd sold out the supermarket business to Woolworths in the mid-'80s, and they sort of progressed into a bit of development within them, within the family business. They sort of progressed into well, if we want to keep doing these developments, we need to get ourselves a building company, which they did in the late 90s. And at that stage, it was a local business here in Hobart that they bought out, which then progressed into they've sort of taken a business over in the northern part of the state too, and subsequently taken over another building business in the northwest. Yeah, so it sort of really progressed within the state, and probably one or two of the biggest builders in Tasmania. So we currently have about 300, or it sort of fluctuates between 250 and 300 employees.
Wow.
So it's a reasonable wages bill to meet every week.
Absolutely.
And, so it's a bit of a beast, and that beast needs feeding. And luckily enough, there's plenty of work at the moment.
It's a fair cross section of business that you do too.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously, we've got our own joinery shop here, which is again where I started when I started with Boss, and that houses between about 25 and 30 guys at any given time, about 2,500 square metres of workshop. We've got our own bench top, post-wall laminating workshop out the back of that as well. We've got our own paint shop. We've got our own glazing business. And construction arm. Yeah, whilst the majority of it here is in Hobart, and then we got shop fitting as well, which was again developed not too long after we started. The boss is taking over the building company down here. So that was 2003. We started the shop fitting side of the business. And that currently employs, like I say, it was only 2 or 3 of us to start with, and that currently now employs about 35 directly. So
big growth.
So it's been very strong growth over a long period, and albeit the last couple of years has been tough with everyone, I think, in the industry.
Yeah, I guess so, mate. It would have been even harder with travel and so forth for you guys too, because. Obviously, you do a lot of stuff outside of Tasmania.
Yeah, it's interesting that whilst Melbourne's in lockdown, it was quite difficult to find work, and with the uncertainty. And but we had a couple of really good key clients that sort of were able to supply us with enough work to sort of see that through. But in Tassie, it was really different because we had no cases. We were insular to the rest of the country. We were, and there was a lot of work happening here. So it was almost like working on 2 worlds. Tassie was sort of like normal, and Melbourne was almost like working in Mars at that stage.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's completely different. So, but we managed to keep our core team together very well, and it works very busy at the moment. So
good on you.
It's going well.
With being based in Tasmania, is logistics a big thing of managing to get stuff around not only Australia-wide but worldwide?
Look, I think logistics is a nightmare for anyone, anywhere at the moment. So it's it's certainly challenging at times. And but I think traditionally, or if I can reflect historically, it's with our joinery business down here, to get our joinery out and about hasn't been so much of a challenge, because we'd have a container of joinery going out every other week, to all sorts of parts of the country. So it's that hasn't been overly difficult historically. It is a little bit different now, but certainly we've got our small manufacturing plant in Victoria now as well. So that sort of eased that burden a little bit in regard to not so much the cost but just the timing.
Yeah,
it's not. we're suffering, I suppose, like everyone else, with other suppliers coming in. So no, it's not here, and that sort of stuff. So on the rebound of that, we've got to try and mitigate that as much as we possibly can, and we've been able to do that out of our Melbourne factory. So
I guess we're at the opposite end of the scale. Like us, we just did a big shopping centre down there at Glebe Hill in Tassie, and the logistics for us to send stuff across. Sydney to Melbourne's overnight, but then Melbourne to Tassie's another
couple of days.
Bit of a logistical nightmare. You've got to make sure it gets on the boat and gets across, and that's hard on the timing, mate. So I feel you there. It's just the opposite way around.
Yeah, I think when we send stuff over as well, we get some freight equalisation scheme applied to what we do. So the cost is actually mitigated a bit, but like I say, it's the timing about
correct,
things that's the real challenge at the moment.
I guess though, having an in-house area that you're able to manage a little bit as well. I know there's not too many here in Sydney that have got their own in-house manufacturing plants for joinery. Yeah. You can manage that a little bit more, where if you're relying on import from China and the likes, you don't have as much control over it, but having it internally, you're able to manage it a little bit more in that sense as well.
Yeah, that's right. And I suppose we've set up a bit more traditionally, as opposed to a lot of, the project management sort of set up businesses too. So, which, we already had that infrastructure in place. So it wasn't like, it'd be very difficult to go and set up for a joinery shop these days. But
exactly.
Certainly if you've got it in place, and we certainly saw a gap where, particularly those issues with, importing, joinery in particular, there was an opportunity there for us to be able to supply a service that otherwise was, can be and has proven to be a bit difficult. Even prior to COVID, let alone, off the back of that now with still some supply issues from overseas. So, look, it is certainly a benefit, and in some instances, but then you still need to be able to, facilitate the work into it to make it, viable and that sort of stuff. So,
yeah, certainly. Now, mate, what are some of the changes you've seen in the shop fitting industry in your time?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's been lots of change, but then there's also been a lot of things that haven't changed at all. I think and even just in building in general, there's not a lot of stuff that has changed. The actual building part of it, what I have seen is there's been a lot of change in, qualifications, certification of projects. That part of it it's almost represents 30% of the job now to get things, approved and certified, and
the health and safety things behind the scenes, Stu, is nearly as long as the actual fit out.
Yeah, I think with the safety side of it, I mean, Voss are right at the top of the game on that side as well. So, and with our fit out game being off the back of our large construction company, we were able to sort of be at the forefront of that within the industry, and that's why the likes of airports and hospitals and that type of environment really like working with Voss, because we've got all those systems in place and our accreditations.
It's second nature.
Yeah, so it's still hard work, and it's definitely a priority. But that's certainly an area that Voss have been very strong in for as long as I've been with them. So it's not anything new for us. So it's it's a big part of the game now. So safety and accreditation.
And then, what are some of the challenges that you face in the shop fitting industry?
For now, look, obviously we have resources a huge problem everywhere.
Yeah.
At the moment, so it was even hard prior to obviously our current employment rate around the country, to find that reliable resource and skill base. So it's I suppose a little bit like myself, when you fall into these industries, and it seems that that's a really common tale for a lot of the people I talk to, and I've been involved in associations on a national basis, and a lot of the discussions we have around there is that resource base, particularly from our apprentices up, Now, we don't have a specific shop fitting apprenticeship in Tasmania, so which has sort of put us a little bit behind as well. But certainly we've got carpentry apprentices that we're sort of formulating into shop fitting apprentices. So we're getting set up for that next generation. But it's certainly resource, and obviously the demand right now is pretty high. So there's that's certainly a big challenge right at the minute. It's coming out of the COVID, hibernation, if you like, and sort of going into, because it seems to be busy absolutely everywhere at the moment, which is fantastic. There's not enough people to do it.
It's a common issue across the industry, mate.
Yeah, but I think the shop fitting or fit out industry is still going to be very, very strong. There's a lot of argument around, online, buying and things like that. I still think my core belief is that people still like getting out and be sociable, to go to shops, and the bricks and mortar face of the industry. And the other thing that I think will drive me, I've got a 19-year-old daughter that has really enjoyed her online shopping experiences and that sort of stuff. But a couple of things that are really sort of standing out for me, just in observations. One, that I think just about every purchase of clothes that she got, she sent back because it hasn't fitted correctly.
It's the wrong size, mate.
Or anything like that, or it wasn't quite out how she thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And the other side of that is that, we've got a generations coming through that really are chasing instant gratification, no matter what it is. So for them to wait a week, for something that they've bought, I reckon there's going to be an element of,
I do too, mate. I
like
do.
That they want to go into a shop, buy a nail fits. They've got it for that.
They want to go and buy it. They want it. They want it now.
Feel it.
Touch and feel it. Yeah, they want it now, right here, right now.
So definitely the convenience of online shopping is great, and I do it myself. But certainly, I think there's a bright future of
couldn't agree.
Video game still.
Couldn't agree more.
I think it's also too, and we've mentioned it a couple of times on our podcast, the largest shopping centres now are creating an experience. So you go to the shops and you go to the restaurant and you go to the movies, and then there's bowling and there's a lot of other stuff. And it's not just the old style that it's one major and 20 shops, or a couple of majors and 100 shops. There's actually an experience now that are trying to attract a different generation and a different crowd, that they still need the shops there to be able to get the people there, but it's the add-ons to that type of thing as well.
Correct.
Yeah, I think there's, for a long time, there's been, movie outlets or movie theatres and that attached to shopping centres around the country. So they've sort of dabbled in that, but I think definitely with the food scene and the offering that happens now, particularly with brands going into shopping centres, I think there's a real opportunity there that obviously there's to fill the voids, or another example of that offering to the masses. And it's not just traditionally, you wouldn't have insurance companies in shopping centres, whereas you can do all that in the one spot now.
One-stop shop
Insurance, or with I've seen car yard setting up as a with a dealership within a shopping centre too. So I think that's all part of evolution, and it's I could imagine being pretty tough to in some instances you might have 3 or 4 different jean shops in the one shopping centre, all competing against one another. It's really hard to be viable and sustain that viability over a period. So I think there's just a balance that we need to get, to be obtained to keep that sustainability around the shopping centres. Just
on that, I've got 2 comments. The car yard setup, it'd be interesting to take on the latest Ford around level 2 of the shopping centre for a test drive.
Yeah, exactly.
Having a quick spin around there, down the escalator or something like that. The other thing is, you mentioned before about online shopping, and I know the supermarkets have dabbled in that, where COVID was real prevalent, that you're able to do your online shopping and then they deliver it that afternoon or the next day. But I had a lot of the complaints I heard was that they're only getting half your order, where, hey, I've ordered bread, milk and whatnot, but we're out of bread or we're out of milk. Where if you are out and about, well, hey, there's no bread in the supermarket, but I can go to Baker's Delight, or or they're out of bananas in the supermarket, I can
go to the Fruito.
go to the Fruito or the deli or whatnot. So you need to actually be out and about, even doing your grocery shopping.
Well, that's right, and that's where that convenience then becomes inconvenient.
Correct. You've got to go out anyway.
So I think that, but I'm sure the online thing will be very beneficial and suitable for some people, and that may well be the elderly or the people that can't get out and about, like we do. They might not have vehicles, or they're not on a public transport route or something like that, which works very well. But for convenience for a young and up and coming family, I've been there. I think just being able to, even when you're out and about, to be able to duck in, like you say, the convenience to go on and get your things if something's not there, you can get it next door or whatever it might be. And the other thing too is I think was the convenience of sitting down and doing your picking list. I think the time frame that you're given, that you're going to have a truck there or whatever with your goods at a certain given time, that becomes inconvenient times as well.
Yeah,
we've done that ourselves. So, but again, I think there's room for all of it in our markets, and that's going to suit some people, and it just won't others, or it's more convenient with others doing it differently. So,
yeah, exactly. The old, we'll be there on Wednesday between 7 and 5. Make sure you're home. That's
yes. Yeah.
Now, with Voss, how do you advertise to your clients? Is it through repeat business, word of mouth, or do you have an advertising plan to get new clients as such?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We're, particularly in the early days, there was a lot of cold calling in the early days, and not just cold calling on a phone, but going and knocking on people's doors to go and introduce ourselves to look what we do, and that's why I'm incredibly thankful for the early days and the relationships we had with a wonderful retailer to really set us up as a base, and we just built off of that because we were in all sorts of parts of the country, and there were plenty of opportunities that we could see, going into some of those big shopping centres and seeing all this work being done everywhere. That sort of really opened our eyes up to what was really available. So there's a lot of cold calling, and then of course all that introduction. And particularly in the early days, it was like, why would we be going to Tasmania for a shop fit out in Queensland or New South Wales when we've got 500 or 600 shop fitters on the eastern seaboard that we could get our work done by. So, fortunately enough, we've been able to prove ourselves in that area, and we have a lot of customers come to us these days. We don't really go out sort of seeking it too much, and obviously the balance of supply and demand, and we've got some really good clients in the stable, and they want to continue working with you. That's where most of our work comes from, in that repeat space. So.
And I guess that proves that you got the runs on the board, that they keep coming back, and then the new ones are knocking on the door as well.
They're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And look, that's really just boils down to, the real fundamentals of business, of good old-fashioned service and quality.
Customer service, mate, absolutely.
If you're not servicing the customer, someone else is.
That's right.
Now, away from work, how do you relax?
I've got a great family, and we've certainly spent a lot of family time. We've got a place down on the peninsula that we get to as often as we possibly can. A nice shack down on the beach, so which we do a lot of fishing, a lot of water orientated things on the beach most of the time, and so it's certainly getting away from it as much as we can to sort of go back to that simple life. Really, that's what we chase when we in that downtime. But then on the flip side of that, outside of our fit out game that we're in, I've got a little. My wife, we've got a little side business that we do as well, which keeps us entertained. Now the kids are sort of getting to that stage where they're moving out of home, and we sort of found ourselves wanting to keep busy with it, because if you're not dropping the kids off to sports or dancing or all that sort of stuff, you're sort of looking at it and thinking, oh, gee, what are we going to do? So, Yeah, so we sort of developed a little business which we make a powdered pepper sauce, which we sell all around the country. So
Wow.
it keeps us very, very busy.
You better give it
now.
a shout out, mate, so we
Yeah.
can advertise
You
it.
better advertise it then, mate, here on the podcast.
Oh, well, if you want to look it up, it's pepper sauce. It's PEPPERCE sauce.com. And you'll be able to get the best pepper sauce for your steak, your snitty, your roast meats, or whatever that might be, made here in Tassie. We're in about 70 retailers now, so
Wow.
it's keeping us pretty busy. And I think we're up to probably sold 30,000 units of the packets of sauce. So,
Who looks after that, mate?
so that's my wife and I. So
Yeah, good.
we're so we've got to come up with it's a recipe that we sort of come up with many years ago, and sort of a gap in the market, and we were good enough to have some good supporters around that too. And,
You'll have to send us up some, mate. You'll have to send us up some we can sample them. I had steak last night at the famous Mittagong RSL, and I had pepper sauce on it there, but not sure if it was your brand, mate. But I'd be looking forward to test some out. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, well, certainly we send 8 buckets of our sauce up to the Mount Isa Irish Club
Really?
every month. So get onto your RSL and get on to try this pepper sauce out. So so we sell a caterer's bucket as well as, or it's actually a caterer's and an extreme fan bucket, we call it. So
Good on you.
and we sell a lot of those two online as well as for our retail.
Have to keep an eye on it. You mentioned about your shack, mate. How far is that out of Hobart?
About an hour away, and
Okay.
about maybe an hour and 15, and it's not too far from Port Arthur, and but we're sort of on the coast and lovely 3 kilometre long beach, and northerly facing, so it's a place where I grew up. Really, we had a family shack down there for many years, and we were fortunate enough to get one of our own.
Now, mate, to finish the podcast, we ask our fast 5 questions. It's just to get to know you a little bit better. What would be your last meal?
Oh, it'd have to be steak and pepper sauce.
I was going to say it'd have to be the pepper sauce here in some way, shape, or form. I'd be disappointed if it wasn't.
Very nice.
Yeah, hopefully that's not for some time yet, though.
No, of course,
absolutely.
of
What
course.
sort of steak, mate? What's your favourite steak?
Oh, look, I get torn. I like a Scotch fillet. I like the flavour about that. But certainly the eye fillet is very, very difficult.
I had an eye fillet last night, buddy.
And then, obviously, on the back of that, how do you have it cooked?
Medium.
Medium. There you go.
Very nice.
Good choice.
Your drink of choice?
Oh, I love a cold, icy beer. Just at the end of the day, and that's definitely my way to go. I am susceptible to a nice red wine at some stage, but not a big red wine drinker, but I do enjoy one when I have a good one. So.
Good.
Sounds great. If you could trade lives with anyone for a day, who would it be and why?
Oh, I reckon it'd be my wife, actually. And that was just be more to be like, I just wanted to get her perception of what it's like to put up with me, I think. So it's, I think it's been an interesting sort of thing, because you sort of think what people think of you, and even your closest people, and you think, how do I really reflect that? But anyway, it's, I think that would be very interesting.
That's the next episode of the podcast we're doing. She's coming on.
She's coming on. Name this voice.
Exactly right.
If she's anything like my wife, she'd probably need a medal, because mine would need a medal to put up with me.
Yes.
Who do you admire the most?
Oh, gee, that's a good question too. I mean, my parents were great influences on my life, and the managers that I've had, and I admire my kids. I admire everything that they do. But I think really at the end of the day, I mean, my wife does amazing things for our family. She's had a great career of her own. She's been the EA to the Premier of Tasmania, whilst bringing up our kids, and been horribly involved with everything that happens there. So I've got so much time for her and what she's done for our family and myself. So
Good answer, mate. Good answer. I think they're all like that, because we obviously get tied up with our own businesses and so forth, and behind the scenes, the wife looks after kids going to sport or, like you said, to dancing or whatever along the way while we're so involved with work and so forth. So, yeah, you're right in what you say, mate. You do admire them the most.
Yes, without doubt.
And she does make the best pepper sauce too, I've heard.
Allegedly.
Yes.
Now, if heaven does exist, what would God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh, gee, I reckon it'd be, thank God you're here. It's you come and settle your mother down because she's trying to run the show up.
That's probably the best answer we've had, I reckon.
I think it is too, mate.
That's tremendous.
Mate, thanks very much for coming on the podcast, giving us your time. Mate, all the best to you and the family. And congratulations on the last 20 years, mate, of your involvement with Voss Constructions. And look forward to the next 20 years of your involvement with Voss Constructions.
Yeah, you might not see 20 years out, but you got a few more years to put up with me yet. But thanks very much for having me, and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Mate, good to chat, and catch up soon.
Very good. Thanks, gents.
Thanks, Stuart.
Take
Appreciate
care.
your time. That wraps up the 42nd episode in our chat with Stuart Percy from Voss Construction. How good was it to hear about Stuart's career and his life in Tasmania? If you want to know more about Voss Construction, their website is vossconstruction.com.au. That's VOSconstruction.com.au. And to check out Tasmania's greatest pepper sauce, go to peppersauce.com. That's PEPPERCESAUCE.com. And you can order there to get your own batch of their sauce, Tasmania's greatest pepper sauce. If you have missed any previous episodes of the KRGS Doors podcast, you can download them from our website, www.krgsdoors.com.au/podcast, or on your favourite podcast player, search KRGS Doors. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. This also boosts our ranking and my ego. The other thing, I suggest if you have enjoyed the podcast, visit your favourite podcast player and leave a review or a rating. On our next episode, we speak to Jason Nightingale, former superstar premiership winning rugby league player, who is now a superstar in the business world, owning his own cafe, running a business school for elite athletes, working with St George Illawarra Dragons in their corporate commercial space, also working with the NRL to help transition retiring players into life after sport, and also holding down a full-time job. Keep your ears peeled for that chat, which is not to be missed. I've been your host, Drew Blackman, and you've been fantastic for tuning in today. As always, you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. Thanks. Till next time. The KRGS Doors Show, proudly brought to you by KRGS Doors. For all your shopfront roller shutters, roller grills, folding closures and bifold doors, visit www.krgsdoors.com.au.